So in this project, this is video number 5, we're going to talk a little bit about object-oriented design, and we're going to talk about classes. This is just an overview on how to do the tax sample, the sample tax project. It's not a lot of theory on object-oriented design. We will cover that more in class, but I really want you just to get your project going, so let's do it together. In classes, we're going to notice we have this tax class. Okay, when I open up the tax class, you'll notice that I have a lot of code here about the active record design. Okay, and all of this here is all the functions. This function here is sets the database. Okay, this function here finds by SQL. This one finds all by SQL. This one just finds just by an ID. Okay, all of these are just functions for the database. Okay, to how to connect into the database, how to sanitize the attributes, which are column names, how to delete from the database. Okay, all of these are just functions. Okay, what we want to do is we want to make a new class, and we want to move this into that new class so it can be used by other classes if we wanted to create different classes. Okay, so what we want to do is we'll want to come over to classes, we'll right click new file, and we're going to save it, and we're going to call it database object.class.php. Make sure you name that correctly. Database object.class.php. That's very important. Okay, we click save, and in our object we're just gonna, it's just a PHP document, so PHP, and close the tag, and we're going to just call it class, and it's database object. Okay, camel case. Okay, and we click save. Okay, that's our database object. We go back to our tax class, and let's just cut, not copy, but cut all of our active record code. Okay, from those the two lines at the top where you saw it come across, from this comment down to the other comment, let's just cut that. Okay, and we'll save our database object, and we'll save our tax class. Now, while we're over here in the tax class, let's go ahead and extend the tax class. So what that means is we want to be able to use the tax class, and we want it to make it to the child of the database object. Okay, so we're going to use the keyword extends, and we're going to say database class. Sorry, database object. Okay, and that's the same name that was used here. Okay, so extends database object. We're going to save that, and that means that this is now a child of the database object. Okay. All right, now we also need to do another thing. We need to go into the initialize over here, and we need to manually add the definition for that new class. So I'm just going to copy this line, and I'm just going to paste it in. Work on my alignment a little bit, and instead of class, I'm just going to type in database object. Okay, instead of tax. And I don't want to purchase, so we're fine. All right, we can save that. There's initialize. Again, it uploads just fine. Okay, I'm going to close the initialize, and now I've got my database object, and I've got my tax class. So now we need to make a couple adjustments to the database object to make it more usable by multiple classes. Right now, this database object is really set up just for tax, and we can see that by going into, say, this function here. Let's just read it real carefully. It says SQL, set the SQL, select all from tax. Well, that means that this really is just, hey, instead of find all from any table in the database, it's, hey, just find it from this tax table. So we'll want to make this so that it works better with multiple classes. Okay, with multiple subclasses. So what we'll want to do is we'll want to make some changes. So the first thing we can do is Control F, and let's just find the word self. Okay, find the word self. So the first one, it's highlighted here. It's self database. Well, because we have this database set up here where it says database, the self database actually works. However, if we find the next one, again, it's self database, so that one works. So let's find the next one. This one says self instantiate. So as instantiate is in here, what we'll want to do is, since we're calling it from the tax class, we want this actually to say static instead of self. So just change it to the word static. So anywhere you see the word self on this page that's not directly next to a database, we'll want to change it to static. Okay, and that means that if we have multiple classes, we'll be able to, call this class, and it will say use the subclass that is calling it instead of just self. So let's find the next one. Okay, let's find the next one. And that one is good. Let's see, the next one is good. The next one is good. At the end, we should have 10 of these left. There should be 10 selves here. So this one is not good. Let's go back. Self, next. Okay, so we come over here, highlight it, call it static. Okay, and back over here, find the next one. That one's good. Click next. That one's good. Good. Okay, so we're at the top. Let's count them. 1, 2. This one here needs to get changed. And this is definitely not as easy as it is in Adam. That's okay. Static here. And we'll go static here. Okay. And we'll go static here. Okay. And keep looking. So I'm just going to start at the top, and I'm just going to find the ones that are highlighted because I still controlled F. So this one's good. That's 1. That's 2. 3. Okay. 4, 5. 6, 7. Keep looking. 8, 9, and 10. So we're good. Okay. So at the end, you should have 10, and they should all say static instead of self. Okay, you should have 10 selves left. All right, now at the top of our database object, we want to move this line, static protected columns, back into the columns that it's supposed to go to. So we're going to just highlight these columns. We're going to cut it, and we're going to put it back into the tax class because these are the columns for tax. Okay, so let's look at our columns. We've got a problem here. One of our column names is actually just supposed to be ID, not user ID. So lowercase ID, okay, and we come over here, we're going to want to change this to ID, okay, and because we changed that to ID, we're going to want to come down here and change this to ID and this to ID. So if we did a search for user ID, we should not get any user IDs in this file. Let's also check in the object class for user ID. Anytime we see user ID, we want to change that to ID. Okay, so let's go in here, and I got one right here. So this is an SQL statement. It says select all from tax where user ID. In our SQL, remember we changed it to just ID. Okay, so let's keep looking, and it should be in a square. Remember, we just now called this ID instead of user ID, so we need to change that. Okay, let's keep looking. Again, where ID, and again here, ID, and down here, ID. Good. And let's just keep looking. This is just a comment, but we might as well just change the comments also. And here's another one, ID. And we're almost to the end. Here's another one, ID, and ID. Okay, so we save that. It uploads. Okay, so we've changed all of those. We go into our tax class. It's all been changed there. Let's go back to the database object. We need to add a couple properties to the database object. we can get rid of some of this some of these comments. Let's just make this cleaned up a little bit. We want this to say the first one needs to be static protected database. The next one needs to be static protected, make sure it's spelled right, table name. Okay, if we're going to pass in table name, we need to make a protected variable for that. So the next one's going to be static protected columns. And let's make that one an array, just like that. And we can just make one in case we're going to have errors later. We want to track errors. We can just say public errors, and let's also make that one an array. Okay, save. Now, what we want to also do is make a change to our SQL statements. Okay, so right now our SQL statements are grabbing select all from tax, but that doesn't work very well for object oriented. Instead, let's go ahead and make it work better for the for all tables that come in here. So let's start here on the first one for find all, okay? And let's say select all from, and then there'll be a space. Let's add our quote, give another space, and let's concatenate, okay? And we'll say we want it to be static, and we want it to be table name, okay? Because we called it up at the top. So we'll go table underscore name, and that's calling the table name at the top. And we'll close that up and get rid of all of that. Okay. So if instead of just calling it from tax, now it's going to grab it here, because we're going to actually, I'm now back over to the tax class, and I'm going to add another item here that's called static protected, and now I want to give it the table name. So this is where I can actually name the table here, and it's going to be called tax. Okay, so remember our table was called tax. So let's just think about this for a second. We've made a tax object, but what if we had a different object or a different table in the database? Now we can have the other table in the database. We put its name here, and we would put the columns here. Okay, so now we can take this name and this column, and because this is extended in the database object, this database object can automatically use those. Comes over here, and now it says wherever we use this find all function, it's going to use that table name that's calling it. Okay, so we'll want to change that. So I'm just going to come over here, and I'm going to copy the end of this row, and anywhere where it says from tax, I just want to put in that and finish it up. Okay, so it'll say select all from, and then boom, the tax table or the monkey table, whatever table you've got in the database, it'll grab it. Okay, so let's go down and look at some more of our functions and make sure that we're not using the word tax. In fact, if I hit Control F, I can look and see we've got a tax. Start at the top. I've got one here, insert into tax, when really I want to say insert into the table name. And again, in our update statement, it should be update the table name. Okay, and let's just keep looking, and then also a delete here from tax. So if we come down here, let's do this one first and finish that off. Okay, and then let's do it again at the top. We got one here. Let's add that in. Let's see. We want to put a dot, and we want to finish. Make sure that looks right. So it would say update and update. That looks perfect, just like that. Set. So I've removed tax. I've concatenated it correctly. And here, let's paste that in. Insert into. Now, it's very important to make sure you have a space here, because there will not, even though you've got a space after the quote, there will not be a space. So it looks like I have two spaces. I can get rid of one of those spaces. And then I have my table name. Come over here. And I want to finish my concatenation and then start up that quote again. Again, I want to put a space after that, or there won't be a space. You got to put a space here, or there won't be a space when it's time to do the join. Okay, so let me keep going up. Make sure I have all the taxes done. That does look pretty good. Okay, so a little bit of thinking you're going to have to go through here and say, hey, instead of using the word tax, let me go through these functions, these query functions, and remove the word tax. Okay, all right, so we've adjusted that. So our classes look like they're really good. Okay, notice in our tax class, we have our static public function taxation here. This is where we're going to go ahead and we're going to write our function for that we're going to call and use in our tax class. But that's actually being called from the index file. So if we go back to the index file, notice on the index file, let's just look at how this works. We have our header up here, and then if someone clicks submit on the form, we'll run through this little function here. But if you scroll down the rest of the page, it says here's the form, and then here's that little table that's at the bottom. The table's already done. Okay, so the table already works. However, notice we have user ID when really it should be ID. Okay, so we need to change that, and we also need to change it here. Notice that we're building a URL structure to use with the get. However, it needs to be ID, not user ID, because it's going to pass that variable user ID in. That's the variable name, and it shouldn't be user ID. It should be just ID. So we want to change ID here and here, ID here and here. Now when we go up, let's also check the form. And in the form, we use name, wages, withholdings. We don't use any ID here, so we're fine. And let's look inside our if, and it says we have the username, the wage, the withholdings, username. This is all great. We don't actually ever call the ID at this point, but it will be inside the update one. Okay. So the way this works is we're now saying on post, we build out these variables. We're going to send these variables as an array to the construct. If we go back to the tax class, here's our construct. It grabs all the variables in, okay, and it builds this new object with that construct, okay, and it says send in this array to the tax class, build out this construct, okay, and build out this new object so we can use the object, okay. And then from there, it says take that object, set it equal to tax, and then send tax to this function called save. If we look in our database object for save, it's right over here under save. And in save, it's really cool. It says if the ID is set, it shouldn't be a create, which means because in our database we have it set to auto increment, that means there will not be an ID if it's a brand new one. So if the ID is set, we need to update. But if the ID is not set, we need to create. So here's the create and here's the update. One of them, says, hey, let's update this. The other one says, hey, let's insert into or create a new one. Okay. So very interesting how this works. So now wherever we are, we can just click save. Okay. So if we go over to the update, you'll notice inside the post request here, it just says again, save. However, now we need to make some changes here because I see user ID everywhere. So from the get-go, it needs to be ID here. And then in our get, remember we passed it in that URL, we just called it ID. So I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna change all the user IDs to just ID. Okay. So in tax, we want to find this person's taxes and we're going to find it by just ID. Okay. And let's come down here. These are just the wages. Here is just going to be ID and ID. Okay. And I like to keep on this post variable, I like to keep the name of the variable and the variable name itself. So this is the name of the form field and the variable name. I like to keep them pretty close to the same. Although I typically don't do that with username and name. Sometimes I like to keep them shorter. All right, so we come down, we're looking for any more user IDs, okay? And here's one here. Again, we're sending it in, and we want to make sure we send it in correctly as just an ID. And down here, it's going to say user ID. All right, and then also we want to echo out the user ID here. Okay, so it looks like All the users are, and we can just hit a Control F to find, and we can just say, is there any user ID? And it says unable to find user ID. Okay, so there are no more user IDs. I click save, and I don't worry about that pop-up. Let's just save it again. I never know if it actually goes up after I get that error message, so I always like to save it again after that. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and stop this video here. We fixed the update is working. We fixed the index, that should be working, and we fixed the tax class. What we're going to do now is see if all that is done, we should still have a working application. Okay, so I'm going to stop the video and we'll see where we're at. All right, so again, we're here. Here's my tax class. Here's my index. I'm going to go see if this works. I go back to my sample application. I click enter, and I don't get any big errors. Okay, if there are errors, you should be looking and saying, am I missing a semicolon? Is it an unexpected error? Did I name my classes right? Read the error carefully, and it should tell you what the problem is. Okay, so far, just working through that, my Sublime, everything seems to be working. Okay, now the last thing we want to do is fix this index file so that this application, when I type in someone's name, let's go Margie 45,000 and 12,000 and click submit, it actually does something. Wow, this one did something. This one updated, but look how this calculator didn't work. Okay, so it didn't give us a taxable income, it didn't tell us what our taxes were, and it didn't calculate the owed and refund. So if we go back, it works. It sent all the information in, we just didn't calculate it right. So let's start at number 1 on the index file, and let's calculate our taxable income. So we're just going to say taxable income is equal to, and it's very simple, wages minus 10,400. Okay, I'm going to save that, and now I'm going to go back and I'm going to look at my application, and I'm going to say here's my wages 45,000 and my 12,000 in federal withholdings, and click submit. And now my taxable income says it's negative 10,400, which means I still didn't do it right. So let's go back and look and see what I did wrong. So taxable income, I called it wages. It needs to be called wage. Okay, so now I save it, and I'm going to run this again. Click enter. Okay, the best way to run this again is just go up to the URL, highlight it, and hit enter. Now I'm going to do it again, and 45,000 and 12,000, and I should get a much better number. So that's just called troubleshooting. You just go in, you say, oh, what did I do wrong? Oh, it's not working like it's supposed to. Now let's calculate the taxes. Okay, so I go back to Sublime. I want to calculate the taxes. Okay, I can get rid of these 2 lines here, clean it up a little bit, and all I want to do here is just send in my taxes. So it's going to be taxes. Remember that I'm just creating a memory spot to hold what comes back out of this function. I'm going to call the function, which it's actually it's a function that's inside the tax class. So I want to say tax. Okay, that's calling the tax class, and I want to say taxation. That's the name of the function in taxation. And remember, it takes a variable, and the variable is taxable income. So I'm passing into this function. Okay, I'm going to find the function. Here's the function taxation. It's in the tax class. Okay, and because this is a static public function, if it's static, I can simply say : so : taxation, and send in taxable income. So I'm taking taxable income, shoving it into this function. Whatever happens in this calculation is going to come back out as taxes. Okay, so in my tax class, this is where I'm going to put my if statements. Okay, and remember, it's just something as simple as if taxable income is less than 93.25, and then I'm going to do I'm going to do this, okay? Else, and I want to do an else if here, else if, and then I want to do my condition, taxable income is less than, I'm not sure what it is, 32,000, and then I want to do this other else if, okay? And I think this one is just going to be an else. I'm gonna output it. Now, after I get done with all of that, I want to just return, make sure I return taxes. Okay? It's going to return the taxes. Okay? So when I'm all done, it will return the taxes. And that is what's going to go here into taxes. So I'll finish that up. I'll finish that function up. Okay? And then the last one that we'll want to do, it will put it here. Okay? And it's just going to be a very simple if withholdings, we got to call the variable first. Okay? If withholdings is greater than taxes, then what do we want to do? Okay? Okay? We want to say O. So if you have more withholding than taxes, your O is nothing. But your refund is going to be equal to withholdings minus your taxes. And that's what your money's going to, it's what you're going to get back. Okay? And then we'll just say else, because we don't really, it's either your withholdings are greater than taxes or they're less than taxes. So else, your O is going to be equal to taxes minus your withholdings. Okay? So you won't have to pay what you've already paid. Okay? But your refund at that point, refund is nothing. Okay? So now we've set our O and our refund. We've kind of set our taxable income. That hasn't really, we have not fixed that one all the way yet. And we've set this last one to be our calculate owed and returned. Okay. Now we can come over here, save that, and we can go and test it. So we can go into Brian, wages, and submit it. And notice it calculates the wages, it calculates taxable income, it calculates our federal withholdings, and it calculates the refund amount. It did not do taxes yet because that function is not working. Okay? All right. I think at this point, you guys should be able to get this project all the way going, all the way working. If you look in your update, let's see if you guys, if I open up update, if you look in update, you might just see everything looks really great in update. The calculation we just did was already in update. Kind of weird, right? And here is the call that we would have called already. Oh, one thing you'll want to do is if the taxable income, you'll want to copy this over. So if taxable income is less than 0, set it to 0, because you can't have a negative taxable income. That does affect your whole formula. So let's just save that there and upload it. Okay, you guys have a great weekend. You guys should, this is definitely a lot of information for you guys. This is not 100% working. Remember, you're going to need to go into your tax class, and you're going to need to finish up this function here. Make sure that it's correct. Also, you'll notice, let me see if I can pull it across. You'll notice on here, this is some formatting that was done. Notice that in your header, the public header, you've got some cool CSS that makes O red and refund green. Just kind of giving you a heads up. That's kind of cool. And then also in your table, notice the money format. Okay, so if you want, to really do a good job, come into your here and add your money format. It's similar to number format, but this one's going to add dollar signs and stuff like that. It's called money format. Okay, and I think the 2 is the decimal places. Now, this all means stuff, so you go in and just kind of Google what these numbers mean here. Okay, all right. Have a great weekend.